I wasn't supposed to be there that morning. That's the thing I keep coming back to, even now, months later. I had told my sister I'd meet her near Green Park around 11. She wanted to walk over to Buckingham Palace to show her American friend the changing of the guard. I had said no twice. I hate crowds. I hate the heat. And honestly, I'd seen the ceremony so many times growing up that it felt like watching the same film on a loop. But she called me at 9 and begged, so I went. And because I went, I saw it, all of it, from maybe 20 feet away. The sky that day was strange. Not gray, not blue. Something in between, like the color had been washed out of it. Tourists were already gathering along the fence by the time I got there, pressing their phones through the iron bars, holding bobbies up on their shoulders, talking in 15 different languages. A man behind me was eating crisps. A woman in front of me kept apologizing for stepping on my foot. The smell of warm pavement and sunscreen was thick in the air. I remember a little boy, maybe 6, standing on his father's shoulders. He was wearing a red plastic guard's hat from one of the tourist shops on the mall. He kept saluting and laughing. I think about that boy a lot. My sister found me near the Victoria Memorial. Her friend Hannah was American, loud, friendly, the kind of person who says everything is amazing. She was filming everything on her phone before the ceremony even started. The flowers, the pigeons, a black cab driving past. Hannah said, "Oh my God, this is amazing." "It hasn't started yet," I told her. "I know, but the energy." I laughed. My sister rolled her eyes at me but smiled. We moved closer to the gates. There must have been 400 or 500 people there already, maybe more. School groups in matching yellow vests. A bachelor party from somewhere in Eastern Europe, half of them already drunk. An elderly couple holding hands. 2 teenage girls with French braids comparing what they'd bought from Harrods. And then I noticed her. She was standing alone just outside the main crowd, not pressed against the fence like everyone else. She was standing a few feet back, very still, with her hands in the pockets of a long gray coat. The coat was too heavy for the weather. That was the first thing I noticed. It was warm that morning, almost 20 degrees, and she was wearing something you'd wear in November. She looked maybe 30, maybe a little older, dark hair pulled back tight against her head, no makeup, no bag, no phone in her hand. That was the second thing. Everyone, and I mean everyone, had a phone out. Tourists, locals, even the policemen by the gate were holding their radios up close, but she just stood there with her hands in her pockets looking straight ahead. I nudged my sister, "Look at that woman." "Which one?" "The one in the coat, by the lamppost." My sister looked, then shrugged. "Maybe she's cold." "It's not cold." "Maybe she's just weird. London's full of weird people." Hannah was still filming. She didn't notice. I kept watching the woman, not in a creepy way, I just couldn't look away. There was something about how still she was. Most people shift their weight, scratch their nose, check the time. She didn't move. She breathed, and that was about it. The Royal Guard started forming up around 11:15. You could hear them before you could see them. The boots on stone, that clean, sharp sound that seems to come from somewhere very far away even when it's close. The crowd went quieter. Phones went up. Hannah said, "Oh my God, here they come." The guards came out in their red tunics and bearskin hats, marching in that perfect rhythm that looks almost robotic, but is actually one of the hardest things in the world to do. I know because my uncle was in the Coldstream Guards for 12 years. He used to say it's not about looking strong. It's about not falling apart when everything inside you wants to. The ceremony started. I won't bore you with the details because honestly I wasn't watching it. I was watching her. She had moved just slightly, maybe 2 steps closer to the fence. Her hands were still in her pockets. Her face hadn't changed, but her shoulders had dropped just a little, like someone preparing. For what, I didn't know. About 10 minutes in, a man came up behind her. He was tall, broad, wearing a beige jacket. He didn't say anything to her. He just stood a few feet to her right. and then a woman appeared on her left. Same kind of jacket, same kind of stillness. I thought they know her. Then I thought, no, they don't know her, they're watching her. I tugged my sister's sleeve. Something's happening. What? Those people, around the woman in the coat. She looked. This time she saw what I was seeing. 3 people now, then a 4th. They were closing in, but slowly, the way you'd close in on a stray dog you don't want to startle. They weren't in uniform, but they moved like people who were. Are they police? My sister whispered. I don't know. Hannah finally looked up from her phone. What are you guys looking at? Just keep filming the guards, my sister said. I don't know why my sister said that. Maybe instinct. Maybe she felt it too. The woman in the coat hadn't moved again. She was still staring at the gates. The guards were doing their slow march across the forecourt. The band had started playing something. I can't remember what. Something old and brassy. Then one of the men in the beige jacket stepped forward and said something to the woman. I couldn't hear him. He was too far away and there was too much noise. But I saw his lips move. I saw her chin lift just a fraction. She didn't answer. He said something else. She still didn't answer. And then it happened very fast. 3 of them moved at once. They had her arms, both of them, before she could react. A 4th person came from somewhere behind her and put a hand on the back of her neck, not roughly, but firmly, the way you'd guide someone you didn't want to escape. The crowd around her noticed. People backed away. Someone said, "What's going on?" Someone else said, "Oh my God." A woman with a stroller grabbed her child and pulled him close. The woman in the coat didn't fight. That was the strange part. She didn't pull away. She didn't shout. She didn't even look surprised. She just let them hold her arms and she kept her eyes on the gates. I remember thinking, she knew this was coming. They started to walk her away from the crowd, toward a black van that had appeared on the road behind us. I hadn't even seen it pull up. It was just there, suddenly, with its back doors open and a man inside waiting. People were filming now. Of course they were. Phones everywhere. Hannah had turned her camera around and was filming the woman being walked away, even though my sister was hissing at her to stop. "This is huge," Hannah whispered. "This is going to go viral." I wanted to tell her to shut up, but I didn't. I was watching the woman. She still hadn't said a word. That's what got to me. In every arrest I'd ever seen on the news, in films, in real life, that one time outside a pub in Camden, the person being arrested says something. They protest. They swear. They cry. They ask why. They demand a lawyer. They tell the police they've got the wrong person. She said nothing. She was halfway to the van when one of the senior officers, a man with gray hair and a serious face, walked up to her. He was wearing a proper Metropolitan Police uniform, not the plain clothes the others had. He looked official. He looked in charge. He said something to her. I was closer now because the crowd had thinned and I drifted forward without realizing. I heard fragments. Identify yourself. Cooperation. Easier for everyone. She looked at him. For the first time, she actually looked at someone. And she smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't a sad smile. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you know something they don't and you're sorry for them, but only a little. The officer's face changed. I saw it. He went from authoritative to uncertain in about half a second. He took a small step back. He said something into his radio. I couldn't hear what. Then he said louder to the others, "Hold her there. Don't move her yet." That was when I knew something was very wrong. You don't stop an arrest halfway through unless something has changed, unless new information has come in, unless someone somewhere has just realized that this isn't what they thought it was. My sister grabbed my arm. "We should go." "Wait." "No, we should go right now." But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the pavement. Hannah was still filming, her mouth slightly open, her hand shaking a little. The woman in the coat stood there between the four officers. Her hands were still in her pockets, even though they'd tried to pull them out. I noticed that now. They'd tried to get her hands out, and she hadn't let them. Or she'd done it so subtly that they hadn't really pushed. The senior officer was on his radio. His face was getting redder. He was listening to something, then talking, then listening again. He kept glancing at her. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said into his radio loud enough that I could hear him clearly, "Are you absolutely sure? Confirm that. Confirm that twice." There was a pause. Then he said, "Understood, we'll wait." He lowered the radio, he looked at the woman, and then he did something strange. He took another step back, not aggressive, not frightened exactly, but careful. The way you step back from something you're not sure of anymore. The other officers noticed. The man in the beige jacket who had first approached her loosened his grip on her arm, just slightly. He glanced at the senior officer, who gave a small shake of his head. The grip loosened a little more. The woman in the coat hadn't moved at all. Her smile was gone now. Her face was back to that perfect, calm stillness it had been before. The crowd was murmuring. People were confused. Some were leaving. Some were staying. Hannah had stopped filming and was just holding her phone, staring. I heard a man behind me say, "What the hell is happening?" I didn't have an answer. Then somewhere far away I heard a sound. A helicopter, low and steady, not the regular kind that flies over London all day. This one was coming in fast, and it was coming in low. I looked up, so did everyone else. There were two helicopters, actually. Black ones. No markings I could see from that distance. They came in from the east, over the trees of St. James's Park, and they slowed as they reached the palace. That was when the guards on the forecourt broke formation. I had never seen that happen before. Never. The changing of the guard is one of the most disciplined things you'll ever watch. They don't break for anything. Not rain, not heat, not tourists trying to touch them, not people fainting. They just keep going. But these guards stopped. The senior guard, the one leading the ceremony, said something to the others. They reformed, but differently. They moved into a formation I had never seen at a ceremony before. It looked more like something you'd see in a war film. They turned outward, toward the crowd, toward the fence, toward the road. Hannah whispered, "Oh my God." My sister whispered, "We need to go, now, right now." But I couldn't move. Because the woman in the coat was looking at me. Right at me, across the thinning crowd, past the officers who were still holding her arms but no longer sure why, past my sister tugging at my sleeve, past Hannah with her phone half raised. She was looking at me. And she nodded. Just once, small, almost nothing. But I felt it like someone had touched the back of my neck. The helicopters were closer now. I could see figures inside them, men in black, helmets, equipment. Behind me, someone screamed. I turned, and that was when I saw the vehicles coming down the mall. There were 4 of them. Black SUVs, the kind without proper windows, just dark-tinted glass that doesn't show you anything. They came down the mall fast, but not in a panicked way. In a way that said they had every right to be there, and nobody was going to stop them. They pulled up in a line along the road, almost perfectly spaced. The doors opened at the same time. I had never seen anything like what came out of those vehicles. They were men, but they didn't look like normal police. They didn't look like soldiers either, not exactly. They were dressed in black head to toe, with vests and helmets and rifles that looked too clean, too modern, too expensive. Their boots made almost no sound when they hit the road. They moved like a single thing, not like individuals. There were maybe 12 of them, maybe 16. They spread out without anyone giving an order. 2 of them peeled off and went into the crowd, gently but firmly pushing people back. 2 more went to the perimeter near the palace gates. The rest formed a loose circle around the woman in the coat and the officers who were still holding her. A man at the front of the group walked forward. He took off his helmet. He had a short gray beard and very tired eyes. He looked at the senior officer who had been on the radio. "You stood her up," he said quietly, almost disappointed. "We didn't know, sir." "You didn't read the briefing." "There was no briefing on her, sir." The gray-bearded man shook his head once. "There wouldn't be. Let her go." The officers holding her arms didn't move at first. They looked at each other. "Let her go," the man said again. "Now." They released her. She took her hands out of her pockets slowly. She rolled her shoulders. She rubbed her wrists, but not hard, like she was checking they still worked. She walked over to the gray-bearded man. He saluted her. He saluted her. I will remember that for the rest of my life. A man dressed like he could end a small war by himself, standing in front of a woman in a gray coat, saluting her like she was his commanding officer. She nodded back at him. Then she said something I couldn't hear. He listened. He turned to his men. He raised one hand and made a small gesture, 2 fingers up, then a sweep. The men moved. 4 of them went up to the rooftops. I don't know how they did it that fast. There must have been positions already arranged, ropes or ladders I hadn't noticed. They were just suddenly up there, lying flat, rifles forward. The other men spread out further. They began pushing the crowd back harder now, but still without shouting. They had this way of putting one hand up that just made people stop. Tourists with no English at all understood. They turned around. They started walking. Hannah said, "I want to leave." My sister said, "Yes." I said, "I can't move." I really couldn't. My legs had gone soft. My ears were ringing. I had felt my own heart in my throat before, but never like this. This was something else. This was understanding halfway that I was standing in the middle of something I was not supposed to be standing in the middle of. One of the men in black walked over to us. He was younger than the others, maybe 30. He had a friendly face under all the gear. "Ma'am," he said, "I need you to move back." "Sorry," I said. "It's all right, just go with your friends, there." He pointed to a spot about 30 feet away, beyond a row of trees. We started walking. I kept looking back. The woman in the gray coat was still standing there. The senior police officer was talking to the gray-bearded man, and from his body language I could tell he was apologizing. The gray-bearded man wasn't angry, but he wasn't accepting the apology either. He was just listening, and his face was the kind of face that says, "We'll deal with this later." Then the woman turned and walked toward the palace gates. Not the public side, the other side. There's a small gate I'd never really noticed before off to the right that the guards use. She walked toward that. A guard opened it for her. She went inside. The gate closed. That was the first moment I understood that whoever she wasn't just a citizen who'd been mistaken for something else. She was someone who could walk into Buckingham Palace through a side gate while elite operators stood watch on the rooftops. We were behind the trees now. Hannah was crying a little, not big crying, just little wet eyes and shaky breathing. My sister had her arm around her. I was watching the road. Then the second thing happened. A man came running down Birdcage Walk. He was wearing a hooded top, gray, loose. His hands were jammed in his pockets in a way that I now, after the woman, noticed immediately. 2 of the men in black saw him at the same time I did. One of them said something into a microphone clipped near his collar. The other dropped to one knee and brought his rifle up. The man in the hood kept running. A voice came over what must have been a loudspeaker on one of the SUVs. It said very clearly, "Stop. Stop now. Hands out of your pockets." The man didn't stop. I will never forget the sound that came next. It wasn't a gunshot, not yet. It was a whistle almost, a small, sharp whistle, and then a thud near the man's feet, a puff of dust. He stopped instantly. He dropped to the ground and put his hands behind his head without anyone telling him to. I realized later that one of the snipers on the rooftop had put a round into the pavement next to him, a warning. inches from his shoes. The men in black were on him in seconds. They pulled his hands behind his back. They patted him down. They pulled something out of his front pocket and held it up. From where I stood, I couldn't tell what it was. It looked like a small black box. They put it in a bag of some kind, the kind I assume is meant to block signals. The man on the ground was shaking. He was saying something. From his face, I think he was begging. They lifted him up. They walked him to one of the SUVs. He went in. The door closed. The crowd, what was left of it, was almost silent. I could hear my own breathing now. Then I heard the helicopters again, but this time they were leaving. They peeled away over the trees and were gone. The men in black began to move back to their vehicles, calmly, without rushing. They went one at a time, glancing around as they walked, until only the gray-bearded man and two of his team were left near the palace gate. The senior police officer was still standing there, looking smaller than he had 10 minutes earlier. The gray-bearded man patted his shoulder once, said something to him. The officer nodded. Then the gray-bearded man got into the last SUV, and the four vehicles pulled away as quietly as they had come. It was over. Just like that. The whole thing, from the moment they started arresting her to the moment the last black SUV disappeared down the mall, couldn't have been more than 15 minutes, maybe 20. The changing of the guard didn't restart. The guards stayed in their new formation for another half hour, then quietly went back inside the palace. The police closed off the area. Officers in normal uniforms appeared and started moving everyone away. They were polite but firm. They told us there had been a security incident. They told us not to worry. They told us not to share footage online for our own safety. Hannah deleted her video. She didn't want to, but she did. I didn't film any of it, so I didn't have to delete anything. I just had it in my head, all of it. The woman's smile at the senior officer, the nod across the crowd, the salute, the man in the hood and the whistle of the warning shot. We walked back to Green Park without speaking. We sat on a bench. Hannah was still shaking. My sister bought her a bottle of water from a kiosk. I stared at the grass. After about 20 minutes, my sister said, "Who was she?" I said, "I don't know." Hannah said she didn't even say anything the whole time. No. And then they all just left. Yes. We sat there for another hour. I don't remember what we talked about, or if we talked at all. I remember a squirrel coming very close to Hannah's foot and then running away. I remember an ice cream van parked nearby playing a tinny version of an old song. I remember a child crying somewhere and a mother shushing him. Normal sounds. The world had gone back to normal sounds. But inside me, nothing was normal. Because I couldn't stop thinking about the nod. She had looked at me. Out of all the people in that crowd, she had picked me out and nodded at me. Why? I went over it again and again. Had I done something? Had I looked at her in a way that mattered? Had she seen me noticing her before anyone else did? Was she telling me to stay still, to stay quiet, to leave? Or was it something else entirely? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed in my flat in Battersea and stared at the ceiling. My phone was off. I had turned it off as soon as I got home because I didn't trust it. I didn't know why, just an instinct. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and made tea. I sat at the kitchen window. Outside, London was doing what London does. Buses moving, a taxi idling, somewhere far away, a siren. I thought about my uncle, the one who'd been in the Coldstream Guards. He had died 4 years ago of cancer in a hospice in Surrey. Before he died, he had told me a few things, not many. He wasn't a storyteller, my uncle, but once near the end, when he was on a lot of medication, he had said something strange to me. He had said, "Sometimes the people we're really protecting, you'll never see them. You'll never know their names. And the ones you do see, the famous ones, the ones in the papers, those aren't always the ones who matter most." I hadn't understood at the time. I thought it was the morphine talking. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning I tried to find news about what had happened. Nothing. Not a single article. No mentions on Twitter. No videos on TikTok, even though I had seen at least 50 phones filming. It was like the whole thing had been erased. I asked my sister. She said the same. Hannah, who had flown back to America 2 days later, sent me a message saying she had tried to talk about it with her friends at home, and none of them believed her. She had no footage, just a memory. I thought maybe I had imagined it. For a day or two, I really thought maybe I'd had some kind of breakdown. But then, about a week later, something else happened. I was at work. I work in a small office in Holborn doing administrative things for a law firm. Nothing exciting. I was making coffee in the kitchen when one of the senior partners walked in. He's an older man, very proper, very quiet, the kind who wears the same kind of gray suit every day. I had hardly ever spoken to him. He stood next to me, waiting for the kettle. He said, "I hear you were at the palace last week." I froze. "How do you know that?" He smiled, a small, kind smile. London's a smaller place than people think. I didn't know what to say. He picked up the milk and poured some into his cup. Then he said, very quietly, "Whatever you saw, you didn't see. That's the best advice I can give you. And I'm giving it to you because someone asked me to." He walked out of the kitchen. I stood there for a long time. The kettle boiled. I forgot what I was doing. I went home that night, and I didn't tell my sister about the conversation. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat in my flat and tried to understand what kind of world I had been living in without realizing it. That was when I started writing things down, not for anyone to read, just for me, just so I wouldn't forget, because I was beginning to understand that this was the kind of thing you forget on purpose if you're not careful. But I'm not done yet. Because 3 months later I saw her again. It was a Saturday in late October. The weather had turned properly cold by then. London does that. You get one perfect autumn week of golden leaves and crisp air, and then suddenly it's gray and wet and you can't remember what the sun looks like. I was at a small bookshop in Bloomsbury, the kind with creaky floors and a cat that sleeps on the philosophy shelf. I had gone in to escape the rain. I wasn't really shopping. I was just walking up and down the aisles, picking up books and putting them down, doing that thing where you pretend you're looking for something specific so the staff doesn't ask. I was in the back, near the section on military history, when I heard her voice. I'd never heard her voice before, not once during everything that had happened at the palace, but I knew it was her the second I heard it. She was talking to the owner of the shop, a man with white hair and reading glasses on a chain. They were discussing a book about the Crimean War. She wanted to know if he had a particular edition. He didn't. He offered to order it. I stood very still behind the shelf. I could see her through a gap between two books. She looked different. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She was wearing jeans and a brown jumper and a navy coat that fit her properly. She was holding a paper bag from a bakery down the road. She smiled at the shopkeeper, a proper smile this time, warm and real, and he smiled back like she was someone he knew. I should have walked out. That was what the senior partner at my firm had told me to do, basically. Whatever you saw, you didn't see. Whatever you see now, you don't see either. But I didn't walk out. I came around the shelf, and I stood near the counter, pretending to look at a book about the Boer War. She finished her conversation with the shopkeeper. She turned to leave. She walked past me. She stopped. She looked at me for maybe 2 seconds. Then she smiled. Not a warning smile, not a sad smile, just a normal smile, the kind a person gives another person in a bookshop on a rainy day. She said hello again. I couldn't speak. She said, "It's all right, you can say hello." "Hello," I managed. She tilted her head a little. "Are you well?" "I think so." "Good." She started to walk toward the door. Then she stopped again and turned back to me. "You can ask one question," she said. If you want to, I won't promise to answer it, but you can ask. I didn't think, I just spoke. The question that came out wasn't the one I'd been expecting. Why did you nod at me? She smiled again. This time there was something else in it, something that almost looked like pride, like a teacher looking at a student who had asked the right question on the first try. Because you were the only one looking at me before anything happened, she said. Most people don't look. Most people don't notice. I wanted you to know that I noticed that you noticed. That's all. That's all, and it's quite a lot actually. Most people go through their whole lives not noticing. I didn't know what to say. She gave me one more small nod, the same as before, and she walked out into the rain. I stood in the bookshop for another 20 minutes. I bought a book I didn't want just so I could keep standing there. The shopkeeper smiled at me but didn't say anything about her. I think he knew not to. When I finally walked outside, she was gone, obviously. The rain had got heavier. The street was empty except for a man under an umbrella waiting at a bus stop. I walked home. I didn't take the tube. I walked all the way from Bloomsbury to Battersea, even though it took me almost 2 hours and I got soaked. I needed to walk. I needed to think. What had I been part of that day at the palace? What had I seen? I had seen an arrest that wasn't an arrest. I had seen a woman walk toward a van by people who thought she was a criminal, and I had seen those people stopped by other people who knew she wasn't. I had seen elite operators take rooftop positions over Buckingham Palace within minutes. I had seen a warning shot fired from a sniper rifle in the middle of central London on a Tuesday morning. I had seen a man pulled off the street with what I now strongly suspect was some kind of remote device in his pocket. I had seen a woman walk into Buckingham Palace through a side gate as if she had every right to be there, because she did. And I had seen her again, in a bookshop, smiling at the owner like she was just a normal customer. Because the people who do that kind of work, the work she does, whatever it is, can't only be that. They have to also be a person who buys books about the Crimean War on rainy Saturdays. I think about that a lot. The doubleness. How you can be one thing in one moment and another thing in the next, and both are true and neither cancels the other. A few things have happened since then, small things, things I won't write down here. But here's what I can tell you. The senior partner at my firm retired suddenly about a month after our kitchen conversation. He moved to Cornwall. I haven't seen him since. The day he left, he stopped by my desk to say goodbye. He put his hand on my shoulder just for a second and he said, "You did well. Don't forget that." I don't know what I did well. Standing still in a crowd, not telling anyone, recognizing her in a bookshop and not making a scene, I don't know. I never saw the woman again after the bookshop. I look for her sometimes, not on purpose, just in crowds, at train stations, in the corner of cafes. I haven't found her. Maybe I won't. But I think about her almost every day. There's something I keep coming back to. The way she let them arrest her. The way she didn't say a word, didn't fight, didn't even look annoyed. She must have known they were doing the wrong thing. She must have known she could end it any time she wanted to. But she let them do it anyway. I think she was protecting them. I think if she had spoken or shown them who she was or made a scene, something else would have happened. Something worse. Maybe other people would have noticed. Maybe the man in the gray hood would have realized faster. Maybe the device in his pocket, whatever it was, would have gone off. Maybe more people would have been hurt. So she stayed silent. She let them put their hands on her. She let them walk her toward a van. She let it all happen because if she had stopped it any earlier, more lives would have been at risk. That's what bravery actually looks like, I think. Not shouting and fighting. Not refusing to go quietly. Sometimes it looks like going very quietly indeed, because the people around you don't yet understand what's really happening, and your silence is the only thing keeping them safe. I told my sister about the bookshop, eventually, about a year after it happened. She listened. She didn't say much at first. Then she asked, "Do you think she works for the government?" "I think she does something connected to it." "Like properly secret?" "Yes." "Why was she there that day, at the palace?" I had thought about this a lot. I think she was watching the man in the hood. I think she knew he was going to be there. I think she put herself near him on purpose, so that when he made his move, she'd be close enough to do something about it. But she got arrested before he did anything. Yes, bad luck, or maybe a backup plan that almost went wrong. Someone in the regular police saw a woman in a heavy coat standing too still and decided she was the threat. They got it wrong. The whole thing nearly fell apart. And then the men in black came. Yes, because someone somewhere looked at the footage or heard the radio chatter and realized that the people on the ground had grabbed the wrong person, and they came in to fix it. My sister was quiet for a long time. Then she said, and she let them keep arresting her, while the actual threat was still out there. Yes. That's mad. That's what I keep thinking, but I also think she knew the man wouldn't move until he thought everyone was distracted, and while they were arresting her, everyone was distracted. She was buying time, for the rooftops to be ready, for the SUVs to arrive, for the snipers to get into position. My sister stared at me. She used herself as bait, she said. Yes, sort of. I think she made herself the most interesting thing in the crowd, so that everyone, including the man in the hood, was watching her instead of looking for who else might be around. And by the time he realized what was actually happening, the rooftops were already taken. Jesus. I know. There's something else I want to say, even though I don't know how to say it properly. That whole day I was a tourist. I was a person at a ceremony. I was someone who had come along to please my sister and to keep her American friend company. I wasn't anyone important. I wasn't doing anything important. But for a few seconds in the middle of all of it, I was the person who noticed. And the woman in the gray coat saw me notice, and she nodded at me. And later, in a bookshop, she said she had wanted me to know that she had seen me see her. I don't think I'll ever do anything as brave as what she did that day. Most of us won't. Most of us live our whole lives without ever having to make that kind of choice. We pay our bills and we get the bus and we argue with our families, and we never have to stand silently while strangers put their hands on us to save other strangers' lives. But I think about her and I think about the small thing I did, which was nothing really, which was just paying attention. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe most of us are not going to be the woman in the gray coat. Maybe most of us are going to be the person in the crowd. But the person in the crowd matters too. The person in the crowd who looks up from their phone. The person in the crowd who notices the thing that doesn't fit. The person in the crowd who, for 1 second, sees clearly what is actually happening around them. She told me, in the bookshop, that most people go through their whole lives not noticing. I have tried since then to notice. I look at people on the tube. I look at the man selling flowers near the station. I look at the woman with the dog by the canal. I try to see them properly, even just for a second before I look away. I don't know if it matters. I don't know if it does any good. But once, on a strange Tuesday morning in front of Buckingham Palace, a woman in a gray coat nodded at me because I had looked at her before anything happened. And I think in some small way that meant something, not just to her, but to me, to the kind of person I want to be. I have never told this story to many people. I am telling it now because I think it's time, because enough time has passed, because some of the details have probably gone soft in my memory, and that means I can share it without worrying that I'm giving too much away. Because the woman in the gray coat, wherever she is probably still doing what she does, and the people she's protecting are still safe, and nobody knows it but a few of us. She stayed silent while they arrested her. She stayed silent so that the rest of us could keep walking around, going to work, meeting our sisters in parks, complaining about the weather, buying books on rainy Saturdays. She stayed silent so that the loud, ordinary noise of our lives could keep on going. And when the elite sniper unit arrived, and everyone around me panicked, and the helicopters came in low over the trees, I understood, for the first time, that the quietest people in the room are sometimes the ones holding the whole thing together. I will never forget her. I will never know her name. And I think somehow that's exactly how she wanted it.